I am now reconvening the special meeting that was held July 2nd and 3rd and got postponed from the 30th because of the tsunami or the impending storm. Okay, so let me just start by introducing people. Everybody, all council members, please get your calendars out. We're going to need them later on in the meeting. So let me introduce everyone. Mr. Iligan standing, Mr. Kern, Mr. Kanuha, Council Member Kanuha, and Ms. Eoff, Mr. Yoshimoto, and Mr. Onishi, Ms. Willie, Ms. Poindexter, and I'm Brenda Ford. I'm the chair of the committee. This is the Public Safety and Mass Transit Committee reconvening regarding Bill 79. I'm going to read you some rules. This is an abbreviated set of rules, okay? So bear with me, please. Every person at every site will be treated with respect and courtesy. No one is allowed to make negative verbal comments regarding any council member or anybody in the audience, and that's it. So no comments like that. No applause, no yelling, cheering, booing, hissing, or signs are allowed at any time inside the council chambers or near the actual doors of the council chamber, here or at any other site. There'll be no obscenity allowed at any time. I'll try hard to be good. Okay.
We will too.
Yeah, okay, good. No one is permitted forward of the council, the testifiers table here, but there's no public testimony today because this is a reconvening of a recessed meeting. No person with a camera is allowed forward of the table, your side of the table. Now, sometimes we have audio and visual problems, and today it fortunately is not Ka'u. We have a problem over in Kona. So we're doing streaming through a computer and on a speaker. And so what's happening is the time delay is really long. It's like 5 seconds or more. So so we're not taking public testimony from any place, so that shouldn't be a problem. And I hope no one is going to be asking anyone to come forward to talk from Kona, because if we need someone in Kona to talk to the council, I've got to call a recess. We've got to set up a whole different system in order to get them back up talking to us. So council members, please bear with us. If we lose a site completely outside of this location, then we're going to continue with this meeting because we have all council members here and we're agendized for the meeting with everybody here. So if we lose some of the staff, we'll attempt to get them back up on the air, but if we can't, we're continuing to go forward. The council will be taking breaks approximately every 90 minutes if this thing goes very long, and I'll do my best to conclude by 6 o'clock. I don't know that the discussion here is going to take that long, but I'll do that. So please be fair to everyone, and we're going to go forward from here. Now, if anyone is parked out here in Hilo and put money in your meter, it might need to be fed again, so you might want to remember that. I think it's a 2-hour meter, so you might need to keep feeding it every once in a while. Okay, we are now going to start the committee discussion, and let me get a piece of paper. Who would like to have a discussion at this point? I'm going to start with Margaret. It's her beer. God, we're all going to need them by this at the end of the day. Okay, Margaret, anyone? Okay, let's start with you and just keep going.
Okay. I want to be clear that my primary goal here is basically Malama Aina, that dealing with the issue of that GMO plants, organisms contaminate other person's property where they're unwanted, and how to deal with that, and that coexistence might sound like a great idea, but wherever it's been attempted, it has failed. So they have not been able to work out. Go talk to your neighbor. Go work out 5 miles away, 10 miles away. It has not worked. Now, each crop, there are crops that are different. Papaya is one it's easier to set up boundaries and deal with that, and it's not as if like with corn or wheat. But even with papayas, here we have those who are doing attempting to do organic papayas, they need to be certified. They have to go check how many. There are like 12 different potential tests that have to be done, and each time they don't know which one. May not know which one of those different reagents or tests that they need to do. They pay $500 a year to maintain certified, and yet they're always concerned every time there's an inspector that their crop be found to have been contaminated. And Malama Aina, I just want to say, we all want the best for this island, and my focus is on this island and home rule, and that we make our decisions, whether it's exactly what I like or whether it's not, that we're here and that we do have the authority to make these decisions. We almost did not. If SB 727 had passed, our authority to be here today would have been undermined. We would have. It was basically, as one of the GMO representatives said, the local governments, people interfere with their policies and their goals. And they have the right to pursue their goals, but we have the right to have our own authority and chart our own future. So I want to say appreciation to everyone that submitted testimony. I think we had 594 people sign up. Out of those, 273 spoke at the hearings. I have finally almost finished reading through, these are all in support of the bill, not with any attachment. These are opposed. In addition, we each got many emails individually, so there was a great deal. There's just extraordinary knowledge. I think people should realize what an incredible place, incredible people we have here. So I'm trying to, we do have a problem. I think anyone that doesn't see that there's an issue here has got to be blind to what's going on around the world or on the other islands, and that it's important that we deal with it now. If we don't, we will be giving up our authority, abdicating, and the state legislature will most certainly make a decision what it wants for this island. We are really the only island, the only county left where the biotech companies are not so well established that if we were to come in and try to regulate, that we wouldn't be undermining a whole job segment. And I think, to the best of my ability, what my aim to do is how do we draw the line fairly? What is Pono? Where do we deal with papaya, which have been studied for 12 years? How do we deal with them? How do we deal with and just trying to uphold the line where we are, but not say, oh, let's send it out. Every time there's been a task force, nothing has happened. Every time there's been committees, nothing has happened. So that doesn't mean that I believe it's very important to pass this now with what I want to know is where everybody on the council disagrees, what would make it so they could live with this bill. I debated going down to, well, what's the lowest common denominator that still has integrity? And instead I decided pretty much to go with a more, continue to include all the findings and purposes. But I wanted to hear what you all have to say, and also for the public to be able to follow the conversation. So I actually have prepared an amendment which would allow this,
excuse me, Miss Willie. Okay, you just timed out, but because she has an amendment and she is the originator of the bill, I'm going to allow her to present her amendment rather than let us start discussing the bill without the amendment. It doesn't seem to make sense.
Okay, I'm going to wait in. Let me just say the amendment adds an ad hoc committee onto it. It still passes the bill. But I am going to, let me make a few more statements and then go to allow others to speak. So there are different options. The one other option is I wrote this bill to minimize the amount of regulatory decisions that would need to be made. how to enforce it, what would be in registration. And a lot of that really could come out. What a law does is it sets a standard. This is what's acceptable in our location. And you can also put in how it's going to be enforced, how it's going to be regulated. I think one can craft this in a way without taking out, just like when we did the coffee bill and taro, it doesn't say, and if you break this law, this is what happens. Or don't put cigarette butts on the beaches. So that's another option. We can eliminate that and allow the ad hoc committee to go forward and address those issues. So I think the important thing is looking through going through the exceptions. Basically in this draft, papaya, there's absolutely no regulation of papaya other than that they register. And registration does provide the knowledge to all of us. So
you need to make a motion to put the amendment on the floor before you start talking about it.
Okay. Or why don't I'd like to yield because I really haven't heard others, and I just sort of want, if we sort of generally discuss and move forward, if that's okay. I'd really rather do that.
Thank you. Mr. Onishi, you're next.
Here comes Poindexter.
Here we go. I'd just like to say I do agree that there's an issue before us, and it's GMO is the issue. I'd like to also say that I know we have the anti-GMO and GMO, but if we print out the pros, for me, the anti-GMO and the pro-GMO, they had both sides gave me great arguments. My job here is to sit and to listen to both sides. That's what my job is. I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist. I didn't go to school. I'm not a farmer. So for me, I'm listening to both sides with both great arguments. Then I've also thought about, well, how can we come together to be able to talk about what needs to happen? I've gone around, they've come to my community, both sides, tried to talk with our communities, and we came to the table, both who were for and against. And we had great discussions. We just had one. You were there in my community and on Saturday for anti-GMO, and you had some of the people who were growing the GMO corn, and we had a great conversation on how we could move forward, and even the possibility of acknowledging that if they could grow a type of corn that was non-GMO, but they're not farmers. So even if you look at the cattle ranchers, they're not farmers. So if the shipment, something happens to the boats that don't come in, and they don't have feed, then what do? We say, well, you got to be a farmer now, but we don't have a backup for them. So I'm a little afraid of what we're doing as a council because we don't have the expertise. So that's why I am putting in a resolution to do a task force. Whether you're putting something else besides the task force, because you alluded to the fact, Councilmember Willie alluded to the fact that task force don't work. Okay, Richard Spiegel was on a coexisting state task force that they had. They came up with a study and showed what things didn't work and some things that worked. So I called him. I said, can you sit down with me? What worked, what didn't work? Or do you agree that we need to bring the experts to the table? While we put a moratorium on, for me, I would like to see no more GMO introduced to this island. Okay, no more GMO introduced to this island until we start doing that task force to find out, do the studies. We're not the experts here. I'm listening, and like I said, both sides have great arguments. And I cannot tell this person whose reality, their perception is their reality on both sides. I cannot switch their sides and try to talk them into switching a side because that's their reality. But we're not, I just feel so uncomfortable not being that scientist at the table or saying things about USDA and FDA here that I don't agree with, because if you're saying I'm not trusting them, I have to trust them to some extent. So all I'm saying is I'm sitting with Richard Spiegel. A lot of you may know him. He's an organic farmer. He was the honeybee guy, and looking at a task force that has a level playing field, that brings the experts to the table so that they can advise our council, like what Margaret we did with the Real Property Tax Task Force. We had the audit done. It was completed. It came before the council with a lot of recommendations. We created a task force to address these issues to come before the council. And all I'm saying is this is a very serious, critical issue that we're dealing with, and to have it just come before us and for me to help make a decision this critical without having all of the players at the table, which I know can work. And even Richard Spiegel, he says, coming together, because he's a mediator also. It can. He sat on that. He said what didn't work. That's why I went to him. What didn't work? How do we need to organize to make this happen while we don't allow any more GMO onto this island, okay? No more prohibitions or more GMO on that island. I don't agree with any field testing. With exception to the floral industry because it doesn't hurt our food supply, I don't think, and that's something I got to go research again. I've been doing a lot of research. I feel like I need to go back to school and become either a farmer or a scientist. But so I'm saying with the exemption of the floral industry because it does not affect our food supply, but no open field testing, no more introductions of GMO or no more prohibitions, while we move forward with the task force at the same time. So something as simple as that can work, and it would be a level playing field and with the experts at the table. So thank you very much.
Mr. Reese, you still want to pass? Okay. Ms. Eoff.
Thank you. And thank you, Margaret and Val. I've been thinking about this so much over the last few weeks. I've read as much as I could read. I've listened to videos. I've talked to people. And I agree. We're not going to become experts, but we're also elected to protect public health and safety, and there's some very real concerns out there. Yesterday I listened to the discussion on Kauai County Council, and all I could think of was I hope we don't get to that discussion. I hope we can do something here to prevent us from down the line just worrying about how much tons of pesticides are being dumped on our ag lands, our water, groundwater, indoor air, dust, children, all of that. So I actually on my own before I was glad to hear the two of them are both thinking about a task force and or an ad hoc committee. A task force was something that earlier on was out there, but I'm not sure whether we can do both. I see the difference between a task force and an ad hoc committee, though, whereas a task force may take this bill out of our control, and no more than one or two of us could be part of a task force, whereas an ad hoc committee, if I could get some clarification maybe from Mr. Ishida what it could or could not do, I'd be interested to see, because an ad hoc committee could include up to 4 of us, and then we could meet with experts or bring in as much information as we need for as long as it takes us to be able to craft some language into a bill that could become an ordinance simple enough to belong in our county code, effective enough to do basically what the prohibition on taro and coffee has done. And so I'm not sure whether an ad hoc committee could be a vehicle for us to achieve language for an ordinance, or if there's something that would prevent us from meeting like that.
For the record, Lincoln Ashita Corporation Counsel. Ms. Eoff.
I'm sorry I didn't give you more warning than I was going to call you.
You gave me more than enough. It's a good question. There is a distinction. What you're talking about when you talk about up to 4 members, that's called a permitted interaction group. We call it colloquially, I think this council calls it an ad hoc committee. They are subject to, there are certain sunshine law requirements. For example, you couldn't form that today. You can't form it today because it's not on the agenda for creation today. So that's not, it can happen in the future, but it's not going to happen today. The good part about the permitted interaction group is up to 4 council members can be on it, along with members of the public, stakeholders, whoever, and you meet outside of sunshine, and that's permitted, and as long as you report back, and you all know the rest, right? the danger with setting up what you're talking about, a task force, okay? There's some danger to that. You don't want it to be, you don't want to make it overly specific. And the reason is one of the unintended consequences of creating a task force is
Is this as opposed to the ad hoc idea?
Yes, as opposed to the ad hoc, is this. The definition of a sunshine board under HRS Chapter 92 is any organization or any entity which is created by legislative act, which is required to take official action at meetings. Now, you got to be careful with that, because that's what you could inadvertently be doing, is creating we're thinking, okay, a task force, up to 2 members of the council, members of the public, stakeholders, go off, do your thing, and report back. I'm not sure that it's as simple as that. I think when you start making it very tight and formalized in terms of, okay, this is what you're going to do, this is the issues you're going to discuss, this is who's going to be on it, I think that you could inadvertently create a sunshine board by not intending to. So my suggestion, if you go down the road of a task force, to the extent that you can, keep it as broad as possible, because with the specificity, I think, brings the requirements of Chapter 92.
And then as far as an ad hoc committee made up of up to 4 members of the council, would they have more freedom to investigate?
Excuse me for interrupting. They would clearly, those up to 4 members, plus members, whoever else you want on it, clearly they can act and meet outside of sunshine, because it's set up for that purpose.
And would we just need to be careful how we define its scope and purpose then? Or
well, under that
tricky?
Under that section, that requires specificity. It requires that the members of the board be identified, that they be charged the specific task or the specific task that they're being assigned to investigate. That requires the specificity.
Well, I think it's something as we deliberate today that we could keep in mind as we discuss this. So I just wanted to get as clear as I could. I'm not sure if I'm able to articulate what the scope and purpose of an ad hoc committee would be, but that's what I guess we have to talk about.
Thank you.
Mr. Kern. Okay, I wasn't. Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to summarize some of the things. I mean, I've learned, like I said, probably more than the average citizen at this point, but not enough to know all the nuances. Margaret said that one of her main concerns with GMO is the cross-pollination and the effects that crops could have on other crops. That is clear as a problem, but I think my main concern, and what, if I'm looking at trying to narrow our focus to something that we can legislate without being too cumbersome, I would like to identify what it is actually is the biggest threat to our island. And after digesting what I've been able to and listening to what's going on in Kauai, I pretty much agree with a statement that Valerie, Ms. Poindexter made, is that the field testing, GMO open field testing, and the GMO seed corn has actually presented the biggest threats to our environment and to the people here and on islands in general. Whereas on the mainland, some of the regulations and restrictions may work. I feel that the islands are such unique and fragile places, and that we're so small that the amounts used to grow these types of crops and this type of farming is a lot more intense as far as its effects. So for me, I was looking at how can we pinpoint something, because I think what we've seen so far in Bill 79 is a little bit unmanageable, and I guess that's, I'm not trying to put it down. I admire Margaret for bringing this forward and including everything she did in the bill, but I think if we're actually going to be able to pass something here, I would look more at the example of the prohibition on GMO taro and coffee as somewhere we need to go towards there, maybe not as simplified as that, but something less cumbersome than what we're looking at now, and easier to understand and something easier to prohibit, because if we can narrow it, then I think, as someone has already mentioned, the enforcement would almost become a non-issue, because it just wouldn't be able to occur. It wouldn't be something you could hide away, and you would know exactly what it is that's prohibited, and I don't think we would have to worry so much about enforcement either. And later on, I mean, as we learn more, as the world learns more, as science learns more, I think we can always come back and adjust our code to either include or exclude things. So I would say, I hope we can either form an ad hoc committee to include members of the council or something. That's kind of where I've concluded my thoughts at this point. Thank you. Mr. Kern.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, let's first start out by saying that I'm vehemently opposed to Monsanto and the alike. 100%. We are dealing with a unique county, a unique agriculture environment here. I am very much about balance. And I think this conversation, it is not started out with GMO. I think we should move on to food sustainability and food security. That's what this conversation is really about. It's all tied together. I'm not a GMO guy. I'm not a super anti, and I'm not like super supportive. I'm just trying to find balance. I think there's a place for it when it's there. I have some concerns with this bill, just like right where it goes into the prohibitions, where it says no person shall knowingly engage in propagation.
Mr. Kern, are you on the amendment?
I am on the original bill.
Original bill. Okay, thank you.
No worries. Yeah, I'm on the original. I think the amendment looked to be the same as well. Yeah, no person shall engage in propagation, cultivation, raising, growing, sale, or distribution of transgenic organisms. That's huge. And then you exempt it down below. I'm just like, if we're going to do something, it has to be succinct and concise. And to me, that says, Safeway, you can't sell. And I mean, that's a different conversation than labeling. You know what I mean? I'm just like, if we're going to look at it, it needs to be thought out. And I am not a scientist as well. I don't have a degree in any of this stuff, but I'm just trying to bring logic and common sense to it. I have a major issue with predatory farming. We can't be having that. I have a major issue with cross-pollination. That's huge. But everything pollinates differently. I think we need to go and look at things on a case-by-case basis. I too support an ad hoc committee or some type of group. Maybe it's a task force, or it sounds like ad hoc committee would make the most sense. But I think there's a place for GMO at times. If there's going to be something that is going to wipe out an entire industry, like it could have done with papaya, I don't see a problem with that. The same way that I see corn with 18, modified 18 different ways, and it's Roundup ready. I mean, that's different to me. It's kind of apples and oranges. And when you take one thing and if you're going to lose it, and there's a way to save it, if that's the only option that we have, we might need to look at that. Or we have to look at it and say, do we no longer want that industry? Do we no longer want that crop? That's